Thanks, Finn. This is unbelievable. This is really special. As Finn said, this is the 10th CMX Summit. We started about 5.5 years ago. We were doing multiple events the first couple of years, switched to one a year to really make it the big event. When we started, I couldn't imagine this many people, this many community professionals coming to one room, to one event. I'm not sure there were this many community professionals in the whole industry at that time. So this is a really, really special event. And it's crazy that we've gotten here in just 5 years. I'm going to start off with a quick story on my background. So this is me before I knew how to dress. This is about 7-8 years ago. I was the director of community for a company called Zarly. Anyone remember Zarly? Few hands. See, that's funny, because at the time, every single hand would have gone up. Zarly was like the darling of Silicon Valley. We had raised $50 million from Ashton Kutcher, Groupon, Sands Capital, Kleiner Perkins. We hired 50 people in a year, and we launched in 15 different cities at once. And Zarly was a marketplace. It was like Craigslist, but you can ask for things instead of sell things. And so my job, I was a director of community. It was my first director-level community role. And my job was to build our community of sellers, build our power user program, build engagement on the platform. And man, launching 15 cities at one time was not the right approach. That's not how you build community. But we had all this momentum, all this energy, all this press in Silicon Valley. We had all the things startups think they need, but ultimately our product wasn't really retaining people, and we struggled a lot to really keep people on the platform. The community was growing, people were happy and engaged, but the product was struggling. And what I did to solve those problems were I just kept taking on more work. I just kept doing more and more and more and more. I started doing more marketing. I started doing more content, started writing newsletters. I was managing a community team of 4 people. I was running our office of 9 people in New York City. And I was just getting more and more overwhelmed and more stretched thin. And then we decided, after 9 months or so of me being at the company, we decided to move everyone to San Francisco. And that's what brought me out to the Bay Area. And I thought it would get better because I would be physically present with the founders. We'd start improving how we're communicating. But it got worse. More kept piling on my plate. I was stretched thin. Things started slipping through the cracks. I was overwhelmed. I started doing poor work. We weren't hitting our goals. We didn't even know what our goals are. It was unorganized. It wasn't setting up anyone for success. And a month later, I got fired. So moved to San Francisco, left my girlfriend at the time in New York, who's now my wife, came to San Francisco, and a month later, I was fired from my job. And I was devastated. It hit my pride. It took me down many notches. I remember just walking straight out of the office after having the conversation with the CMO. I couldn't talk to anyone. My vision was blurry, and I just walked straight to the water. I just had to get to water, and I sat by the bay, by the pier for 3 hours and just asked myself, why? How did I get here? What could I have done differently? I've always been a high achiever. I couldn't imagine how I could have gotten to this point of extreme failure. And it took me a few months to build up my confidence again. I started doing consulting, got good feedback from my clients, realized I wasn't really shitty at my job. And so I started to get a little more confident, but that experience really did lead to ultimately launching CMX, to make sure that we're building a support network. So any community professional, anyone who's building community for a business, doesn't have that experience I had of feeling completely isolated, completely lost in your work, and you feel like you have the tools and the support you need to be successful. And so we launched CMX with the mission of helping community professionals thrive. That's always been our mission. And so to see all of you here, to see this event reach this size, to see how the industry has evolved, it's really my dream come true. So thank you all for being here. And it was a big year for CMX, right? We were a bootstrap team for 3 years. We did a whole lot with a very small team and basically no budget. But this year we had a big announcement. CMX was acquired by Bevy. And that's been an incredible experience so far. Bevy's a software platform that helps businesses build communities offline. They're a great software platform. CMX focuses on education, content, community. And so it's brought CMX a lot more of the resources we need to achieve our mission, to throw events like this. And we bring a lot of that thought leadership and content and education to Bevy's clients. And we launched in 30 different chapters this year our CMX Connect program. How many CMX Connect chapter leaders are here? Yeah, give a round of applause for all of our chapter leaders. So all of them. They are all running local events, and this is a huge mission, a huge part of our mission at CMX, to make sure that locally everyone has a support network, everyone has people that they can count on in their own cities. And so if this is a huge point of this event as well, build up this community. If you don't have a chapter in your city, you want to start it, let us know. We'd love to have you start it. And make sure to visit your local chapters when you go back to your cities. We have 3 pillars at CMX. One is education. We want you to learn, get the resources, training you need to be successful. 2 is advocacy. We want to advocate for the industry, promote the industry broadly. And 3 is community. We want you to connect with each other. We want you to feel like you have that support network, and you're going to get all 3 of those here at this event over the next 2 days. Now let's talk about data. There's lots of cats in this presentation. Liven up the data a little bit. So we did this study in 2017 on how businesses are measuring the value of community. And we finally got a chance to do it again in 2019. And you're all going to get a preview now of some of the really interesting insights we found from that research. And we're going to be releasing the full report in the next month or so. But we're going to share some really interesting data with you now. I'm going to start off with the 5 key trends that we found from this research. All right, number 1, community programs are maturing and they're focused on scaling. We're seeing these programs are getting more mature, and a lot of them are focused on growth at this stage. 2, businesses are building both online and in-person communities. The majority of companies are focused on both. 3, engagement is our biggest frustration as community builders, as community professionals. The biggest frustration we have is engaging our community. 4, retention is our number 1 goal, but we're still really struggling to measure that value, and vanity metrics are still showing up a whole lot in what people are tracking. And 5, that said, businesses do believe in the value of community wholeheartedly. Everyone's bought in. People really do believe in it, and our data shows that businesses will be investing more over the next year. All right, so let's go into each one of these, and I'll share some data. Cats. All right, so community programs are increasingly focused on scaling. They're increasingly becoming more mature. So we asked, are you scaling a community? Are you starting a brand new community? Are you trying to revive an existing one? 59% are focused on scaling an existing community. 22% were focused on building a new community. Almost half of the communities that we surveyed are more than 5 years old. All right, so these communities were launched more than 5 years ago. They're becoming more established or becoming more mature. 53% of community professionals have more than 4 years of experience in the field, which is super interesting. Like I said, I don't think there were this many community professionals when we started CMX over 5 years ago. And now there's more and more people who are reaching director level status, VP level status. We're growing in our career. Community teams are, for the most part, pretty small. 75% have less than 5 people. This is interesting because we want to have more resources, more people, but it also shows us the opportunity that we have, right? This is the value of community, how much we can scale our work with just a small team. And there are actually more B2B companies entering the community space now than B2C. We saw 22% of B2B companies were starting new communities. B2C was only 12%. So B2C is a little bit more established in the industry. B2B seems to be coming in more and more. And I'll be touching on that a little bit more because it's been interesting to see how that's impacted our industry. Number 2, the majority of companies are building both online and offline communities. So we asked, are you building online, offline, or both? 58% are doing both. So the majority of companies are doing both online and offline community programs. 38% were online only, digital only, and only 4% were offline only. So basically everyone's doing online community, and this is all community professionals that we surveyed, so everyone's doing online, but the majority are doing both online and offline. When we look at the offline and we dug into that data, it's all about these local meetups, local events. 82% of the people who are hosting events were doing local meetups, local events. Conferences and summits were number 2, workshops number 3, but conferences and summits, a lot more popular. This is pretty obvious with B2B companies. 71% of B2B companies are hosting conferences, which is pretty interesting. Only 34% for B2C. So in B2B, conferences are becoming a huge part of these community programs. All right, and we asked, are these events run by your team or by your community? And actually 62% said that they are running events that are run by volunteers. So this is a kind of program that's been growing a lot over the last couple of years, and I'm really starting to see it peak up. A lot of companies are now empowering their local ambassadors all over the world to host their own events. And those programs can scale. Generally, in-person community programs are on the smaller side, fewer than 5,000 total members, total attendees at their events. Online size communities, they're a little bit more distributed, a little bit more even. Generally under 100,000, but within that, it's a little bit more evenly distributed for online communities. But 77% of companies are running less than 50 events per year. So not a ton of events, but here's the interesting thing. If you look at 1,000 or more, there's 7% of companies are running over 1,000 events per year. That's not negligible amount of companies that have figured out how to scale up their offline community programs to be running over 1,000 events per year. I thought that was fascinating. A great example of this is Duolingo. We're going to be hearing from Laura at Duolingo later in the event and sharing their story of how they scaled up their program. They're now hosting over 2,000 events a month. It took them 24 months to get up to that point. 2,000 events a month. And they have 2 full-time community people running that program. That's the opportunity, right? That's how we really communicate our value. That's how we scale up our work. A small community team, if we can empower our community and give them a framework, a repeatable framework, then we can actually scale our communities exponentially. Then we tried to get an understanding of what is online community good at and what is offline community good at in your opinions, right? We just asked for your opinion, which one's better? And so we asked about online. We asked what scales more easily. You said online. Online won by a pretty big margin there, which is interesting because we just saw how offline can scale as well. But the perception is online is going to scale, offline is going to be small. Which one requires less budget? Which one do you think it is? You're right. You're all right. 100%. Which one do you think is better for customer support? You're right. Online. And which one's easier to measure? That was starting to get a little mixed, which is actually what the data showed. Started to even out here a little bit, but you're right, online. Easier to manage? It's getting a little controversial in here. Online. They found it was online, but this is a much smaller margin now. It's pretty similar. Better for customer retention? Wow. You guys must have filled out this survey. In person. And which one has greater business value? Wow, you guys are good. Well done. You all get A's. So this is really interesting, right? We perceive online to be easier to scale, requiring less budget, better for customer support, easier to manage, measure, but then the actual business value of customer retention and the impact on our business objectives, everyone said that they found in person was more valuable. Interesting. Number 3, our top frustration, not enough engagement in our communities. Raise your hand if this is your top frustration. Raise your hand if you're lying. So the majority said that that's a top frustration. It's a little different for online and offline. So this is for in-person, offline. The top 3 frustrations, getting members to attend events. Their efforts are manual and not automated. and it's hard to quantify the value. Top 3 frustrations. We could see the rest of them here. Those are the top 3, pretty evenly distributed. And then taking too much time, difficult to maintain a consistent brand, and lacking sufficient budget was actually a lot lower, right? In previous studies and other studies I've seen in the industry, lacking budget was a huge issue, but only 21% said that this was a top frustration for them. Pretty interesting. And 14% said they don't have enough staff. Also very interesting. So it seems like we're getting the budget more now and the staff more now, but it's about scaling ourselves, it's about building that engagement and improving the value of our work. For online, very similar. Number 1 challenge, getting members to consistently engage. Number 2 challenge, hard to quantify the value. Number 3 challenge is our work feels manual, it's hard to automate. So same 3 top frustrations for online and offline, just 2 and 3 are switched. But it's a little bit more of a discrepancy here. So you could see engaging members, getting people to engage online was 55% said that was their top frustration. So pretty big margin. The next one is 44% about quantifying the value of our work. And then we had our efforts are largely manual, not automated. Again, budget pretty low, 15%. Interesting data there. If we compare the two, these frustrations were more pronounced for online communities, which was interesting as well. Higher percentage. These are basically the frustrations that we listed for both online and offline, so you could answer both, and they were much more pronounced for online across the board, except for lacking sufficient budget, where in-person was a little bit higher. So engagement being a big problem for a lot of folks online and offline, but it seems really pronounced online. And we asked if you thought that social media, the lack of trust in social media fatigue, if that's affecting your engagement in your community. You said no, not really. Only about 19% agreed. Everyone else was either neutral or disagreed. So we don't seem too concerned as an industry that social media is affecting our ability to build our communities and drive engagement there. So that's good to know. Number 4. This is my favorite one. Retention's our number 1 goal, and we're continuing to struggle to prove the value of that and actually measure it. All right? So we use a space model. Everyone say hi to the space cat. Space cat's a classic. Like, these are all new cats. Like, space cat's been here a while, all right? He's been in workshops for the last 3 years. Anyone know the space model? Raise your hand if you're familiar with space model. All right, so a lot of you know it. If you're at my workshop yesterday, we talked a lot about it. This is how we break down the 5 areas of value to a business that a community can drive. We have support, which is your traditional support forums. People need answers to their questions. They get that support. We have product, where you're collecting feedback, insights. You're getting that innovation from your community. 3 is acquisition. It's where you're building communities that help you grow your business, acquiring new customers, acquiring new users, growing pipeline. Number 4 is contribution. You have your, if you have a platform like collaborative consumption or a social platform that you have all these contributors to, you want to build a community for those contributors so they're highly engaged. And then number 5 is engagement, where we're focused on retention, loyalty, customer loyalty. We also split it out for the sake of this study: internal engagement, external engagement. Internal is employees, external is customers. All right, so here's how the data mapped out. The top objective for in-person communities was external engagement by far, retention and loyalty. Those are the goals. 37% said that. 17% said contribution, right? It's about getting contributors to our platform to engage. 3rd place was acquisition at 14%. For online community, pretty similar. External engagement was the number 1 priority. A little bit more of an even spread here, with contribution being really a common investment and customer support being a common investment as well. Kind of surprisingly, acquisition was pretty low here. Internal engagement was low. Caveat there is a lot of our audience, a lot of the folks who take this study aren't as strong in the internal community space. So this is more based on the CMX network and the distribution channels we had. All right. Now, if we compare the two, this is also interesting. If you're building an offline community program, you may want to have different goals than you have for an online community program because you said there's actually very different objectives. So customer support may be obvious, very focused online, right? Offline, less focused on that. Innovation, product ideation, that was pretty similar. Acquisition, offline, very focused on acquisition. Online, less so. Contribution, both of them pretty high. External engagement, both of them pretty high. And when we compared that data to our 2017 study, we got some interesting insights there too. So that light blue line there is 2017. The CMX blue at the top is offline, in person, and the middle one, the dark blue, is online. So you can see customer support, pretty similar if you're just looking at the online one, stayed about the same. Innovation went down quite a bit. It was 13% in 2017, and now both online and offline, 5 and 4%. So it seems like companies are less focused on innovation communities, getting insights, getting feedback. There also seem to be a little bit less focus on acquisition, interestingly enough. I would not have guessed that based on the conversations I'm having. But it seems like it went down 23% in 2017, 14% and 8% for offline and online this year. External engagement went up a lot, contribution went up a lot. So again, loyalty, retention, contributors. We asked what are the top metrics you're measuring. Here are the top 10. And here's the thing, you can see a lot of these aren't, we asked about the impact, how are you measuring your impact? And a lot of these aren't really the impact. They're vanity metrics. They're showing growth rates, engagement rates, total number of attendees, number of events, customer satisfaction. Those were the top 3. And it's the same thing for online. Monthly active users was the number 1 metric. New user member signups and daily active users were the top 3 metrics. It wasn't until number 5 at 31% that people were tracking retention. Only 7% of the teams that we interviewed are able to actually measure their community's impact on customer lifetime value, which is interesting because we constantly hear about that as a metric to measure the value of our community, but very few are actually able to measure that. And only 1/3 of companies are actually able to connect their customer data to their CRM data. All right? So 1/3 have a CRM that they can connect to their customer data. 1/3 have a CRM that they cannot connect to their community data. And 1/3 don't have a CRM at all. So this is a big challenge. If you can't connect your community data to your CRM, there's no way you're going to be able to prove retention. There's no way you're going to be able to show that value. Salesforce was by and large the number 1 CRM tool that people are using. HubSpot was popular with smaller companies. And it's possible, right? We're going to hear from Meta at Branch, CEO Branch later in this event. And they've actually been able to track, reporting 5 million in sourced and influenced ARR in the past 12 months directly from their community. And she's going to be sharing how they do that in her talk later. So it's possible, and we're seeing more and more companies figure it out, especially in the B2B space. B2B companies tend to be more capable of connecting their community data to their CRM data. All right, 36% were able to do that for B2B, only 22% for B2C. Small companies are less successful at connecting CRMs than larger companies. Makes sense. Larger companies have more infrastructure. They're more set up to be successful. And 47% of smaller companies, less than 50 people, did not even have a CRM. So if you're in a small company, it's very likely that you just haven't gotten that structure set up. But important to start thinking about that now because that's what's going to be critical for you measuring your value. All right? And finally, this one's just weird. I asked to take this one out, and the designer was like, I'm not taking that out. So it's here. Thanks, Virginia. Organizations intrinsically see the value, and they're increasing their investment in community. All right, so this is super interesting. Some of these stats are pretty incredible. We're starting to hear from more CEOs, people like Mark Benioff, how community is a critical part of their business. Like we have 7 or 8 CEOs who are going to be on this stage over the next 2 days talking about how community is a pillar of their business and how they're investing in it. There's Buyin. And it was Erica Kuhl, who's also speaking later, VP of Community at Salesforce, who built that up from the ground up over a decade at Salesforce and was able to prove that they were able to drive higher adoption rates, lower attrition rates, and more pipeline through their community. She'll be sharing those specific stats later. So we're seeing more and more buy-in from executives. 88% of the people who took the survey consider community to be critical to their community mission. 88%. 85% said the community had a positive impact on their business objectives. 76% have seen an increased interest from other departments in their business over the last 12 months. These are super, super positive stats. It's really incredible to see how much buy-in there is in community right now. And nearly 2/3 said directly they're planning on increasing their investment in community over the next year. A lot of the rest were neutral. It wasn't that they're just not necessarily investing, but they're continuing to invest the same amount. These stats are incredible. The industry is growing. People are bought in. They're ready to invest more. And I think like this is a fun thing just to, as like not a great metric of growth of our industry, but there are more. These are 4 great books that came out this year. 3 more great books came out this year. There's like 3 more I know are coming out in the next like 6 months. I'll put the back one again too if you missed that one. There's more books that came out in the last 12 months about community than there were in like the last 10 years. It's crazy. It's like clearly the topic. It's what everyone's focused on. It's the biggest, most important thing in our industry, in the world right now. The loneliness epidemic is something that everyone knows about, everyone's talking about. Every business is interested in building their customer experience, focusing on customers, focusing on community. It really is, it's unbelievable to see how the narrative has changed in the last 5 years. It really does feel like community, it's arrives. I feel like the industry has finally hit the point that we envisioned when we first started CMX 5 years ago, when I first started working in this industry over 10 years ago. It really feels like community has arrived, but now it's up to all of us to make sure it's here to stay. And that's what we're doing here at this event, right? We got the buy-in, but now we have to prove it. We have to show it. We have to have the data. We have to get the buy-in. We have to continue to advocate for ourselves, advocate for each other. All right? So there's 3 opportunities I want you to walk away with. 1, start with measurement in mind. All right, you're gonna meet a ton of people at this event who are all thinking about measurement. You're gonna hear from a ton of speakers on all 3 stages who are talking about how they're measuring their community. Start with measurement in mind so you have the data to bring that into your conversation and continue to get buy-in. Number 2, invest in offline communities. The majority are doing it. I think it's an untapped potential for so many companies, and the companies that have figured it out are doing it at incredible scale. There's no better way to build that connection, that retention. As we all said in the survey, it has insane business value. So tap into that. It's scalable, and it's actually really measurable. And number 3, model successful companies. Take these case studies back. Learn from each other. Bring this back to your boss after the event. Bring it back to your team. Show them how other companies have figured this out. Show them how they've proven the value. Show them how they've scaled their community. Model other companies. We finally have a lot of amazing success stories that we can point to in this industry. Take advantage of that. Advocate for yourself and get that buy-in. Sound good? Yeah. All right. You pumped for the next 2 days? Good. All right. I'm so glad you're here. I can't wait to meet all of you. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Hydrate, stretch, take care of each other. Thanks so much. Let's do this.